over to like what K-1, just because if they can, this wouldn't work for my kids because they wouldn't know what to do with it.
Right.
They need to be able to have space to write.
Right. Having, and you know, if I were doing this, the first time I did it in class, I would probably model it, and we would all do it together, and then I'd say, no, we're going to do this again later, and so I'd come back and give you a little more leeway with doing that. Then we'd evaluate what were our questions like? Did your questions lend themselves to deep discussion? What connections did you make? Blah, 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 okay? If I were going to use the textbook, I would do this by giving them Post-it notes, okay? So they can put their Post-it notes down. Another, you know, for a kid, a Post-it note's a big deal. They don't get those very often. And it's kind of a novelty thing, but I get the Post-it notes and they can take them up in the next group. Yeah. So more guidance, especially if it's for a younger group. Yeah.
For an older group, and I haven't used this per se activity, but I've had stuff broken into parts like this. And before I do something like this at the beginning, we do what you call a joint rubric.
Okay.
And I use a rubric to keep them within the guidelines. You know, one, maybe not, so one person would take over the whole conversation. It's just, and they would have that rubric before they do the activity, and they would know what framework in which they were working in.
If I am using this as a process to teach how we do good group work, or do group work well, then one of the things we could do is to talk about who's carrying the conversation, how much does someone talk, et cetera, et cetera. Let's talk about this in terms of bringing out the content. What do you think that, as a result of this activity, what do you think you understand about the content now that you didn't know before? Okay.
I just started teaching U.S. history this year, and I hate to say it, but I really wasn't that familiar with Washington and DuBois, and I really now realize what a total disagreement they had with their thoughts and feelings on how to settle the problems, and I really have a feeling that they did not like each other.
Okay.
At all.
Okay. Now, and part of that was discussed earlier this morning, but one of the things that I hear you say from there is you understand better. Okay? And that is, one of the points for doing this is better understanding. What was it like being able to discuss this with other people?
Different perspectives. Each student has their, and that can be tied to illustration because one person and one student can be has an interpretation can be totally different. I mean, when you talk about the idea that Booker T and Washington not like one another, you come back and look at the emphasis that we made this morning. Who makes a decision who's going to be the leader, not necessarily a thing of disagreement, but it could be competitive, just competition.
Right. And that's one of the points for using this is different perspectives. If I were a very literal reader, I'm going to take away something totally different than someone who has a different understanding or a more global learning mind. So the idea that me being able, literal, to talk with you that's global, I'm going to go, oh, I didn't see that. I didn't think about that. And in the process, I come away with a deeper understanding of it. Eyes on the page. One of the things that they tell us, if we want students to really understand, you've got to have more minutes of eyes on the page. How many minutes did you spend with your eyes on this page reading it? A lot more. Most of you were pulling that back out and looking at it again, looking at that again, and looking at it again. So you may have read it, and you may have read it pretty fast, but you came back and you looked at it again, and you looked at it again, and you looked at it again.
A piece like this would entail that, especially a lot of students would not have understood a lot of this text.
Right.
You know, and even the students that would understand it, you would have to take another look.
Yep. And that's the reason for doing this in a smaller group. Okay. We've already had someone discuss about they're going to take this back and use it within their classroom. How do you see you using this within your classroom? Is this something that you could easily do? Where might you use it?
Well, in my classroom, because we've already dealt with Booker T and W.E.B, DuBois, it would just be something to solidify, to reinforce DuBois' opinion of Booker T's ideas, but Booker T would just be around them.
In my class, we use, I think it's editorials or something from a newspaper that actually summarizes what each one of them said instead of actually the text itself, because it's a little bit easier for my students to understand what's going on with the editorials than it would be for them to actually read this text.
But think about the strategy. Think about the strategy and using the strategy. Okay?
Well, maybe I should do some research, get some more information on Martin Luther King Jr. and Malcolm X, and see if they had any type of discussion like this, and use this for that.
Yeah.
You're fine, they do it.
Okay. Yeah. What about the strategy? Using these, I like to break it up into two different strategies. Could you use this within your classroom? Would you use this within your classroom?
Yeah, you can use it like this. One thing I would do, I would just, in a group of 4, I'd give one group connection, one group discussion, one group task, and one illustration, and have each representative from that group express what their connections are, what their discussion. Just let every group take one as a whole, and then in the future you come back and allow one group to do the entire 4 things that are mentioned.
And one of the things about doing this is the fact of one of the reasons that people were engaged was because of the small groups and bringing those things back. Would you have any problems about feeling like that everybody didn't get what you wanted them to have? I mean, would you feel a need to go back and add notes?
I think, like I said, if you go back, it's like having a model. Like you just mentioned, your students were already, they knew the material. I think that in some instances, you may have to go back, especially start talking about discussion questions in relationship. Because we was talking about how do you relate this to something that they can relate to today.
Okay.
And I try to think about the general idea they put on Muslims as a result of 9/11.
So you could possibly either set that up as your bell ringer, catch their attention, activity, whatever, or you use it to transfer it into making it relevant for what's happening today. Okay? Okay, well, what we wanted to do was to be able to give you another strategy that you could use. The learning centers were part of the ones that we did last time. This is a strategy that you may be able to use within your classroom. When you could do this for homework, or you could have them to do it within the classroom before that they get ready for an assignment. Mike, we're ready to go.
Okay.
Close this out.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Dean.
I'm a little over.
Just real quickly, that little jump drive, they have some neat stuff in there. Dr.